Today I'm joined by VFX supervisor Chris Ritvo, whose work on Remarkably Bright Creatures gives us one of the year's most soulful digital performances in Marcellus, a character who feels tactile, witty, and completely alive. Chris, it's so great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
So, Chris, Marcellus is such a challenging assignment because he has to be photoreal. He also has to carry wit, feeling, and a point of view. So, from a VFX standpoint, what did you feel the character absolutely had to do emotionally for this film to work?
I think the main goal was to just not distract the audience and not have the VFX be like a distraction for everyone and just to be part of the fabric of the film. We really had to create a character, like you said, rather than just create like a background set dressing. And in that way, pretty challenging given how dynamic GPO Octopus is.
Yeah. Like, if it was like a dog or some animal that is probably a bit more static, great. An octopus,
Yeah,
that's the hardest thing you could possibly imagine.
I
Okay.
think it really is. I think it's maybe the most difficult creature you can make CG.
Yeah. And to me, it kind of looks like an alien, his whole vibe.
100%. They are a
Yeah.
little, I mean, they are completely otherworldly. I think that's when I first visited it, we first visited one in Agnatha in Vancouver Aquarium. And honestly, they don't look real. I think I was saying this to my producer, Taylor Rockwell, but like we were always saying, like, we're kind of at a disadvantage because octopus themselves don't look real. They just look otherworldly. They look fake in their tank. And so, it's like to the audience, it's never like Marcellus could never look real. He's too fantastical in a way.
Yeah, it's insane. It's the first thing that occurred to me, like, wow, that looks like something like I'm watching an alien film.
Yeah.
Um, so how do you actually approach though building a digital character so it functions as a consistent performance across the film rather than something designed shot by shot? And how does that mindset shape the way your team works?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think so. I started basically by spending a lot of time with the real octopus, Agnatha. I shot maybe like 25 hours of reference footage with her. I spent the Vancouver Aquarium gave me like all access essentially, so I could be there in the evening. I set up an array of cameras just to get her in her natural environment, but in her tank, just doing what she does. And then from there, I was kind of collecting behaviors and looks because there's many of them for her. She's never in like a default look. She's always kind of changing in some way or moving or the colors change depending on whatever she's doing in the tank. So I basically just collected a lot of reference of that and then started making decisions or choices that best served the film. So I kind of found the default look for her, which was the bright red or the deep red with the black frills and the white suckers. And then from there, kind of chose, okay, well, we need to find the beats of the film that match this. Then we started trying to find behaviors and looks that would match each scene, essentially.
Wow. DP actually kind of mentioned to me that this in-camera octovision technique to simulate looking through the tank, so fascinating. So when cinematography is already introducing distortion into the image, how does that affect
Hmm.
what you build in CG? Are you matching it? Are you extending it? Are you sometimes correcting it?
Never correcting it. That was like a decision we made, which we liked that filter that Ashley, the DP, was applying for the Octavision, and it was supposed to kind of increase over the course of the film as he got sicker, as a story beat. For some shots, we took the filter out just in case the distortion would affect, like if we had to put his tentacle against the glass in a couple of shots. And in that way, we would just match it essentially to what the filter was doing. And then sometimes we would increase it a little bit depending on how much the story or the edit, dictated that.
And what about like Marcellus has to exist in this really interesting space between natural animal behavior that you guys would have to get down pat, but we have to connect with him as well. So how do you and the animators decide where to let him feel like a real octopus and where to sneak in maybe just enough readability for us to connect with him?
Yeah, that's a really important point with Marcellus is like I think you could get really bogged down in just matching the real octopus one to one, but the audience then wouldn't connect with Marcellus at all. Like I think there's a danger of that anyway, that it would feel like he's just an octopus and you don't feel that emotional connection. And I think it was really important, one, that we went into every scene with like a set of behaviors that we kind of enjoyed from Agnetha, or at least I did, with an idea of what she could be, what he could be doing in the tank, or what she did do in the tank. And in post-production, we would always start with a direct reference either of Agnetha or another octopus behavior that we found that kind of thought we matched the scene. And from there, we would like have a one-to-one that we would show Livy for random blocking, saying like, this is a real behavior, this is do this. And then from there, we could start tailoring the performance a little bit more to the story if needed. Um, they're surprisingly expressive creatures in their own way. So nothing you really see in the film isn't something a real GPO or any other octopus could do, maybe slightly heightened in some ways. But I think that also when you're watching Agnetha in the real tank, I always found that like there's a slight bit of like, emotional projection onto her. Like, she's coming up to the tank and watching me. Is she actually watching me? There's a question there. Like what is the actual
Yeah,
interaction? Because they're seeing the world in a completely different way than we are and
yeah,
interacting with the world in a completely different way. So, in some ways I'm kind of wanting that interaction, right? So I kind of say like, oh, she likes me or she likes the camera. It's like it's hard to tell what actually I think she might be curious.
yeah.
Um,
Thinking, what are these things walking around
yeah, what are
outside in
like
the
these
air?
shapes? What is that
These
thing he's
weird
holding,
things.
walking
Yeah,
around? He's back. Like the Aquarius did say like she recognized me after a while. It was just kind of interesting. But then also maybe she recognized me
wow.
because every time I was there, she got food. So
Yeah, that's right.
maybe it was like a response to that. So I think, but in the film, I think part of that, like you might see like a little bit of an extra gesture here and there with the eye or something just to help tell that story. Again, I don't think that's anything out of the realm of possibility. But there's also a bit of like Tova projecting on him a little bit with her emotions and then
Yeah.
mirroring that. And I think that was an important part of the story as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like the VFX don't interrupt Sally Field's incredible performance. Like she is the heart and soul of this film, and that has to be the anchor. But instead, you can't. I feel like you let Marcellus react to what she was giving you. Like that feels like such a smart inversion of how we would normally think VFX works. So, how did that philosophy guide you scene to scene?
Yeah. So my philosophy was always just I didn't want to get bogged down in any technical side with especially with Sally's performance. I I really wanted her to be free in the scene. I wanted the camera to be free in the scene. Um, so I wanted and then Libby to be able to direct the scene however she wanted. I think that was an important part about choosing to do a digital option rather than trying to use like plates of real octopus or something because then we're getting into a very locked state of, oh, the camera has to be here to match the plate back there. If it's digital, we can put the camera wherever we want. We can build the tank however we want. And our department built a real tank with real 10-inch glass, real refraction, real water, and it looks beautiful. And that gave Ashley the ability to light it however she wanted. She's not locked into a set lighting from another space, right? We kind of could arc direct it to our taste. And in that way, then we could also arc direct Marcellus to our taste. And
Mm.
we could use Sally's performance, which is incredible. And 90% of the time, she's acting against nothing, which is even more astounding. She's had that all in her mind. And we would kind of give her cues like Marcellus would be under the rock. He'll come up, he'll go up there and guide her eye line a little bit. But really, it was just her performance that kind of dictated. Oh, and then we had to mirror that, or like you said, like we had to we had to retrofit Marcellus back into that scene, which I thought was really interesting.
Like Chris, I've spoken to hundreds of VFX coordinators and supervisors, and most of the time the project we're talking about is full of spectacle and explosions and space travel. This is really, really nuanced and so story driven. Honestly, I just cannot believe how integrated this creature is in the whole production. I'm so interested to know, were there days where you just thought, we don't want this to look pasted in. It has to be integrated into the physical reality of the aquarium. What was going through your mind when you had those challenges?
I mean, I had that challenge or that thought every day, wake up in the middle of the night thinking that basically. I mean, that was the biggest challenge where the film couldn't be distracted by bad VFX, essentially. It just
Yeah,
had to
no.
fit into it. And he's such an important character. He's the narrator of the story. And and it was just he had the audience had to buy it right away. And that was a challenge, honestly, up until the very end. It was always a question because there's so many different scenes. He's in so many different states. So every scene, like you kind of said, like how do we tailor it to each, or how do we make sure that the assets like consistent? And actually, almost every scene had to be sort of tailored because the way his skin reacts to light in a certain scene, he had to be recognizable but different and realistic, and all of that was just we had to just get that level of detail down in every scene, and it was getting into very specifics, but then also look like standing back and making sure that is his performance working with the actors, is the integration looking as good as it could be to make sure that just nothing stands out to and it was just that level of detail had to go into every scene.
Like literally, if there's one scene where it doesn't work, I feel like the whole movie starts to fall apart for me. Like
Yeah.
it really, it's the pressure is on. It's like no pressure, dude. Just make
There
it
was
work.
definitely
But
no lack of pressure on this movie, and everyone kept reminding me throughout. They're like, "The octopus gonna look good, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, yeah, yeah,
yeah, that's going to be amazing. And but
be
it
great."
really is. I actually think it's super tactile as well. And I heard that there was puppets used as well to kind of as a, I guess, a practical touch point. How does that work when you're integrating that practical stuff to make the CG like feel grounded?
Yeah, for sure. So we 3D printed a real Marcellus, which is a silicone copy essentially from our model. We used
Wow.
that as a lighting reference. We took off his arms because it was too crazy to have, eight arms kind of going unless we could control them. But we put that into our tank as a lighting reference for Ashley and a lighting reference for me in post. We didn't use that too much for an eye line because it was just getting too complicated for the actors. And again, I didn't want to get bogged down and like inhibit that. We did have like a what I call the sock puppet, which is like a little green puppet for any time Tova had to like lift him into the bucket or try to get him out from like dealing with the cables, for instance, underneath the table, um, and in the bucket at the end. And that was like weighted down for her, so she lifted it into the bucket. She had something to lift, and that was really important to get that weight into her hands and make sure it felt tactile for her. Um, a lot of the time at the top of the tank, the actors were just acting against, a clean water tank, which was kind of amazing because they did such a good job. And again, I think it was really led by Sally, who just had that in her mind. And she did such a beautiful job with the acting that it was kind of, in a way, easy to put Marcellus in there because she just knew exactly what to do. In a lot of ways, it was a lot harder because then we had to, add the water to the hands for a tactile response and make sure the suckers were interacting with the hands correctly. And that got, extremely technical and just, frame by frame compositing to make sure everything sit in right.
Wow. And just once again, Sally Field, what an absolute pro. She's such an
She's a
amazing
legend,
actress.
absolute
And she's
legend.
so good in this movie. I hope she wins the Emmy, but that's a whole other story. All right. So a lot of the movie's hardest work, though, is invisible in the best sense. It's not just creature animation. You've got water, glass, reflection, distortion, and environmental contact. And then this threshold where Marcellus moves between underwater and above water, where I think that's where you really have to fly. If it doesn't work, we are screwed. So what's the biggest headache for you?
Definitely coming out of the water was really tricky, especially when he's bridging the gap between the water surface was really difficult. Getting the drips right on his face was really difficult, and making sure. What was interesting was because he's in a small space, usually VFX, especially water VFX, especially if you're doing tentacles in water VFX, usually they're on a large scale. It's like attacking a boat or something. So you kind of have these large splashes and stuff. What was actually tricky was when we put him into the tank and we started doing, traditional water effects. I'd say it almost looked miniaturized. It looked like he was like a giant octopus that was in this giant water space, but then we like miniaturized it down. So we had to keep kind of cutting it down to make it more and more subtle, um, and really pull that back a little bit. And it was like the devil was in the details with the subtlety because especially when he's pushing the water out of the bucket at the end, that was really really tricky. And again, such an emotional moment for Tova and for Marcellus. If the water looked bad, then it was just going to be super distracting. So we had to end up, replacing the whole water surface, making sure we were matching the droplets on the ocean, making sure we were matching the waves to the ocean that we shot practically, and then integrating our splash element into the from there. Um, Definitely anything interacting with Tova's hands was so tricky and so time consuming. It was the last things we delivered for sure. It was just painstakingly compositing frame by frame to making sure that that just looked good.
Wow. It's insane. It's insane the patience involved in this kind of work. But it pays off. It really does. So my final question is like you've worked on so many projects where VFX scale is about spectacle, but here the challenge is intimacy. So does this film change the way you have think you've thought about performance in a VFX sense and what it can be?
That's a good question. I think it's really rare that as a VFX supervisor, I got to work on a project where the VFX was again like so integral to the story, and at the central point of the story, and had to be so subtle. It wasn't like Marcellus didn't have laser guns and stuff like that. Um, I definitely learned a lot from Livy, just in terms of I got to be quite close into the edit, which I thought was really fun because Marcellus is such an important part of that edit. Um, that I think I learned a lot about how to integrate the VFX into the story better, but then also just bringing VFX into the conversation much earlier. We got on, we were one of the first departments in, and I think being in there so early and not being an afterthought really led to just a better product in the end. Basically, I think it just led to us being part of the conversation very early and working our way through the thread of the story.
Yeah, and then of course the payoff is this beautiful product that we're all now
Yeah.
enjoying and crying over. Um, Mate, Remarkably Bright Creatures pulls off something genuinely rare. It gives us this digital character who feels technically astonishing, but emotionally immediate at the same time. Chris, thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.